The scene in Washington unfolded against a backdrop of tense but determined diplomacy. The meeting between President Donald Trump of the United States and Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney was framed as a chance to redefine the North American economic and security relationship. In front of cameras, the two leaders sought to project confidence and unity, even as they sparred behind the scenes over tariffs, trade fairness, and future defense cooperation. Opening his remarks, President Trump turned to the topic of investment, noting the scale of cross-border economic activity. He said, "Foreign investor in the United States, $500 billion in the last 5 years alone, probably $8 trillion in the next 5 years if we get the agreement that we expect to get." It was a line meant to underscore the dynamism of the American economy and suggest that the right kind of bilateral agreement could unleash even greater flows of capital. Trump then struck a note of pragmatic competition. He said, thirdly, there are areas, as the president just said, where I wouldn't conflict, maybe not so much conflict, we compete. There are areas where we compete, and it's in those areas where we have to come to an agreement that works, but there are more areas where we are stronger together, and that's what we're focused on, and we're going to get the right deal. Right deal for America, right deal, obviously, from my perspective, for Canada. The idea, he suggested, was not to eliminate competition, and which he described as natural and even healthy, but to channel it into a framework that produced mutual gains. In his telling, the two economies could still compete in certain sectors, but ultimately would prosper most by agreeing to common rules that allowed fair trade and strong investment in both directions. The conversation then pivoted from trade to security, a sign of how the administration is trying to tie the two issues together under a broader alliance agenda. Trump emphasized one area of potential breakthrough cooperation, a joint missile defense initiative. He said one thing that so one thing where we are working very closely is the Golden Dome. That's the protective mechanism. And you see how that works. It's unbelievable. Ronald Reagan wanted to have it. And at that time, they didn't have the technology, even close to the technology, but he was advanced. And we'll be working together on a Golden Dome for the two countries. And it's something that I think is going to be very important, especially when you look at the world, you look at what's happening. We want to have that protection. It's really amazing. The technology is unbelievable. By invoking the late US President Ronald Reagan, Trump linked the present-day idea to Reagan's Strategic Defense Initiative of the 1980s, sometimes dubbed Star Wars. The difference now, Trump argued, was that the technology had matured to the point where such a defensive shield, which he called the Golden Dome, could be realistically deployed to protect both the United States and Canada. The focus on security cooperation came at a moment of heightened geopolitical concern. Both governments have warned about growing missile threats from hostile states and the need to modernize North American defense infrastructure. By presenting the Golden Dome as a joint project, Trump aimed to portray the United States and Canada as moving beyond narrow trade squabbles to a higher level of strategic partnership. The press conference then turned to domestic politics, specifically the issue of the ongoing US government shutdown and its effect on federal employees. A reporter pressed Trump on whether all federal workers would receive back pay once the government reopened. Trump's response was curt but clear. He said, "I follow the law, and what the law says is correct, and I follow the law. I always." That brief statement underscored his intention not to deviate from existing statutory obligations, though it left open the debate about which categories of employees would be covered and how quickly the payments would be made. Another question went directly to the heart of the day's meeting, whether Canada's Prime Minister would return home with any tangible gains. The reporter asked if Mark Carney would be leaving Washington with a deal on tariffs. Trump responded optimistically. He said, "I think they're going to be very happy. We have a lot of things that we're working on that people don't talk about. They talk about, competitiveness. She's a very competitive person, and they talk about things that we don't necessarily agree on, but I think they're going to walk away very happy. I think so." That choice of words, describing Carney as very competitive and emphasizing undisclosed progress, was meant to suggest that negotiations were proceeding constructively behind the scenes, even if there were no headline-grabbing breakthroughs announced at that moment. The discussion inevitably turned to tariffs themselves, particularly in the context of the next scheduled review of the United States-Mexico-Canada agreement. A journalist asked whether the president planned to set minimum tariff levels for trade with Canada. Trump replied by highlighting long-standing American grievances. He said, well, we're going to have tariffs between Canada and, they have them with us. I will say with our farmers, as you know, they went up to as much as 400%, 250, 300, and even one at 401. We found one having to do with a very small product, but it was high. So we've always had tariffs between the two of us. And actually, Canada was charging us very high tariffs on our agricultural things, a lot of our agricultural product. And that's one of the things that we talk about for bringing that down. The president's figures referred to past disputes over dairy and other agricultural products, which historically have been among the most protected sectors in Canadian trade policy. By calling out specific tariff percentages, some exceeding 300%, Trump sought to portray his administration's approach as an overdue correction to what he described as a lopsided playing field. He then broadened the point, framing the United States as a country long victimized by foreign tariff policies. He said, so this is a mutual thing, but we've been charged tariffs. Look, we're the king of being screwed by tariffs, just so you understand. And I'm not talking about with Canada. I'm talking about with countries all over the world. When you look at Europe, when you look at China, when you look at all of the, almost every country charged the US. We didn't charge them because we were led by stupid people in many cases. Stupid people. They took advantage of our country. They're not taking advantage of us anymore. The remark drew a clear line between his administration's trade strategy and what he described as decades of misguided policy by his predecessors. He insisted that America had for too long accepted unfair treatment in global markets, allowing foreign producers to sell into the US with little restriction while facing barriers abroad. Turning specifically to Europe, Trump offered a personal anecdote meant to dramatize the problem. He said, if you looked at European Union, they're all my friends. I don't blame them. I blame our presidents. I blame our past presidents and, business leaders. But we are the king of countries that have been taken advantage of for many, many years. We've been paying trillions and trillions of dollars and receiving nothing at all. As an example, prior to the deal with Europe, where they pay a lot of money, but they're happy and I'm happy the deal was good. It's a fair deal. But it wasn't fair. You couldn't put a car into Europe. You couldn't sell your agriculture into Europe. You couldn't do anything. Then he recounted a conversation with Germany's longtime chancellor. He said, and now we have it so that it's open. We charge them tariffs. We didn't charge them tariffs a car. They charge us tremendous. I said to Angela Merkel once, I said, how many cars have gone to Germany from the United States? And she said, well, I don't believe any. And I said, yeah, you're right. And well, that doesn't happen anymore. And they're paying a fair amount. It's just a fair amount. It's not. I could ask for much more. It's a fair amount. But the United States now is using the same thing that they've used on us. By emphasizing that the US was now applying reciprocal measures, Trump sought to portray his trade strategy as both fair and pragmatic, not punitive for its own sake, but designed to achieve a balance that he said had long been missing. He then expressed disbelief that previous leaders had not acted sooner. He said, and I just can't believe it's taken presidents so long to do this. And again, we're going to treat people fairly. We're going to especially treat Canada fairly. But I can't believe it's taken so long where we get charged and don't charge them. Japan was a good example. We made a deal with Japan. You saw that, Mark, a deal with Japan. It's a much different deal that we've had in the past, but they would send us millions of cars, no charge. We weren't allowed to send them cars. We sent them no cars. I doubt you had one car go into Jim because we were restricted. They didn't want our cars. Same thing with Europe. Same thing with other places. So now all we do now is fairness. This example of Japan, a country that for decades maintained strict barriers against imported automobiles while exporting millions to the US, was a favored illustration in Trump's trade speeches. He framed his administration's revised agreement with Tokyo as proof that persistent pressure could deliver more equitable market access. Finally, he closed on a note of national pride and political contrast. He said, but fairness leads us to the most successful country there's ever been. We have some advantages over other countries, and we do have a great market. We have an amazing market. Then, in a pivot that reflected the combative political atmosphere at home, he added a pointed warning about what he believed would have happened had he lost re-election. He said, but you know what, if I let this go, if we didn't win this election, if we had these people that were running, that were ruining our country, destroying our country with their open borders and men playing in women's sports and transgender from everybody and win, That concluding statement blended economic and cultural arguments, reinforcing a theme he often uses, that his administration's trade and security policies are part of a larger struggle over the nation's identity and direction. Throughout the session, Trump's tone oscillated between conciliatory and combative, praising Canada as a vital ally in one moment and castigating foreign nations for exploiting US openness in the next. For viewers and listeners, the remarks painted a picture of a president determined to cast trade policy as an arena of fairness restored after decades of imbalance, while simultaneously reaching for historic-scale security cooperation through the Golden Dome project. The optics of the meeting with Prime Minister Carney were carefully managed. The two leaders shook hands and smiled for cameras, but their private discussions reportedly remained intense, particularly over agricultural tariffs and Canada's continued defence spending levels. Canadian officials later signalled that while progress had been made on certain technical issues, the hardest questions, such as how to align the Golden Dome system with existing NATO frameworks, remained unresolved. Analysts noted that the meeting came at a sensitive moment for both leaders. Carney, still early in his tenure as Prime Minister, has faced pressure from Canadian provinces reliant on US markets to de-escalate trade tensions. Trump, meanwhile, has been eager to show progress on foreign policy and trade amid a volatile domestic political climate marked by budget battles and cultural disputes. The intertwining of trade and security themes suggested that Washington seeks to leverage its strategic commitments to achieve economic concessions, while Ottawa hopes to use the promise of closer defence collaboration to ease the impact of US tariffs. In the broader context, this exchange reflects a pattern that has characterised Trump's approach to foreign leaders, a willingness to air grievances publicly while pursuing pragmatic deals privately. By invoking concrete figures and personal anecdotes, from the 401% tariff on a very small product to the car export conversation with Angela Merkel, he anchored his argument in vivid images that resonate with supporters who see him as a tough negotiator correcting historic wrongs. The meeting also highlighted how security concerns, particularly around missile defence, have become entwined with economic negotiations. The proposed Golden Dome project symbolises that linkage, a massive, technologically advanced defence shield that would require substantial joint investment and coordination, potentially reshaping the US-Canada alliance. Critics, however, questioned the feasibility and cost of such a system and warned against framing security cooperation as contingent on trade concessions. Some Canadian opposition figures argued that the country's sovereignty could be compromised if participation in the Golden Dome became a bargaining chip in tariff talks. Yet supporters in both countries saw the discussion as an opportunity to modernise the alliance for an era of new threats. They argued that a common defensive shield could strengthen deterrence and make North America more secure in the face of missile and drone technologies proliferating worldwide. As the leaders departed the podium, no formal trade deal had been announced, but both sides signalled ongoing talks with hints that progress was being made in less visible areas, an incremental advance rather than a dramatic breakthrough. The press conference thus served as both performance and negotiation tool, a stage for Trump to project toughness to domestic audiences while keeping diplomatic doors open, and a platform for Carney to demonstrate engagement with Washington despite deep differences on tariffs. For now, the key lines that resonated were those that captured Trump's dual approach, celebrating cooperation on security with phrases like, "We'll be working together on a Golden Dome for the two countries," and lambasting trade partners with blunt claims such as, "We're the king of being screwed by tariffs." Those phrases will likely echo in the political debates that follow, shaping public perceptions of whether the renewed US-Canada dialogue can indeed produce the right deal that both sides publicly aspire to reach.